Welcome back to my channel. The ballroom at the Fairmont Grand Hotel was nothing short of breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above rows of elegantly dressed attendees, their quiet hum of conversation adding to the grandeur of the annual charity gala. Among the crowd were some of the nation's most influential figures, business moguls, actors, and journalists, all gathered to support a foundation dedicated to helping underprivileged youth. The air was alive with energy, yet an undercurrent of anticipation buzzed as the evening's keynote speaker prepared to take the stage. Seated toward the back in a less conspicuous corner was Barron Trump, at just 18 years old. His tall frame and stoic demeanor made him stand out, though not intentionally. He had been invited by a family friend, a quiet gesture meant to introduce him to a different circle. Unlike many attendees who thrived in the spotlight, Barron seemed content to observe. His piercing blue eyes scanned the room with a calmness that belied his age. The gala had been moving along smoothly. A string quartet played softly in the background as waitstaff glided through the room, serving delicate hors d'oeuvres and champagne. Conversations were warm, and laughter rippled through the crowd. But as the night progressed, it became clear that the highlight everyone was waiting for was the speech. The journalist, a celebrated figure in liberal media circles, had been announced weeks earlier as the evening's keynote speaker. Known for their sharp wit and unapologetic opinions, they were revered by some and criticized by others for their fiery rhetoric. Tonight, they promised to deliver an address that would challenge perspectives and ignite thought. But as the MC introduced the journalist, there was a noticeable shift in the atmosphere. Conversations quieted. Glasses were set down, and all eyes turned to the stage. Barron, too, leaned back slightly in his chair, his expression unreadable. The journalist stepped up to the podium, a confident smile spreading across their face. Dressed impeccably in a sleek black suit, they exuded charisma. The audience responded with polite applause, but there was an edge of expectation. Would they push boundaries tonight, as they so often did? What no one anticipated was how much. As the spotlight illuminated the stage and the journalist began to speak, the evening's elegance would soon give way to a tension that no one in the room would forget. The journalist began with ease, their tone conversational and laced with charm. They joked about the city's infamous traffic and shared a light-hearted anecdote about a past gala mishap involving a toppled champagne tower. Laughter rippled through the audience, breaking some of the initial tension. For a moment, it felt like any other high-profile event, polished, predictable, and harmless. But soon, their tone shifted. What started as general commentary on politics and culture veered toward a more pointed critique. The journalist referenced well-known political figures, poking fun at their quirks and missteps. Each jab drew chuckles and nods from parts of the crowd, but others exchanged glances, their smiles tightening. Then the focus landed squarely on Donald Trump. "Well, we can't talk about the state of the world without mentioning the man who made orange the new black," the journalist quipped, drawing scattered laughter. "Love him or hate him, you have to admit he's the gift that keeps on giving for people like me." The crowd's response was mixed. Some laughed openly while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Barron, sitting quietly at his table, remained still, his expression unreadable. If the journalist noticed his presence, they didn't let on. At least, not yet. The jokes kept coming, each one sharper than the last. The journalist moved on to Trump's policies, his tweets, even his public appearances. The laughter began to thin out, replaced by a growing sense of unease among the attendees. But the journalist wasn't finished. "And of course," they said, pausing for effect, "we can't forget his most overlooked legacy, the next generation." Let's talk about Barron. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Heads turned toward Barron, who sat motionless, his face now the center of attention. The journalist's tone remained playful, but the words carried a sting. Imagine growing up in a golden tower surrounded by marble everything, and your dad tweeting about Kofi, while the rest of us are just trying to survive Monday mornings. That must have been character building. The attempt at humor fell flat. Some in the crowd chuckled nervously, but most sat in stunned silence. The spotlight of the moment, unasked for and unwelcome, had landed squarely on Barron. But instead of crumbling under the weight of the moment, Barron remained calm, his composure unshaken. What he would do next, however, would leave the entire room reeling. The room seemed to hold its breath. All eyes were on Barron Trump, a young man thrust into the spotlight without warning. The journalist's words lingered in the air, heavy and cutting, as the crowd waited for his reaction. But Barron didn't flinch. He didn't shift in his chair or glance around nervously. Instead, he sat perfectly still. His expression was calm, but unreadable. His hands rested lightly on the edge of the table. The silence grew louder with each passing second. A few people exchanged uneasy glances, their discomfort palpable. Even the journalist seemed to notice the tension, their confident smirk faltering ever so slightly as they glanced toward Barron's table. Perhaps they had expected a laugh, or even a dismissive shrug, anything but this quiet defiance. Barron's stillness wasn't born of indifference, it was something else entirely. His presence, understated yet commanding, seemed to grow as the moment stretched on. The room, which moments earlier had been buzzing with conversation and laughter, was now unnervingly quiet. It was as if everyone, even those who had chuckled at the jokes, suddenly realized the weight of what had been said. His silence wasn't just a lack of words, it was a statement in itself. It said, "I hear you, I see you, and I am not moved." The room held its breath, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone. Barron Trump, just 18 years old, was the center of attention in a way he never asked for, and yet he owned it in a way no one could have predicted. The silence seemed to stretch on, a thick tension settling over the crowd. Even the journalist, once so confident and quick-witted, seemed to feel the impact of Barron's stillness. Their earlier bravado had evaporated, and their eyes flicked nervously toward the young man. The seconds felt like hours, and finally, Barron moved. Slowly, deliberately, he pushed back his chair. The soft scrape of the chair legs against the polished floor cut through the silence. At just over 6 feet tall, he was an imposing figure, his height matched by an aura of unexpected maturity. He stood tall and composed, every movement deliberate, and as he turned, his gaze swept across the room. His eyes met the journalist's for a brief moment, and then he began to walk toward the stage. The entire room watched in rapt attention, their eyes following Barron as he moved. It was almost as though the air itself had grown thicker with anticipation. No one knew what he would say, or whether he would say anything at all. But one thing was certain. Barron was about to take control of the moment. And that was exactly what he did. As he reached the edge of the stage, Barron paused. The room seemed to exhale collectively. He stood there for a moment, looking out over the crowd, before speaking. His voice was calm, measured, but carried an undeniable strength, steady and deliberate, with none of the nervousness one might expect from someone so young, especially in such a charged moment. "Thank you for your insight," Barron began, his tone firm yet devoid of anger. The words were polite, almost clinical in their delivery. There was no outburst, no sharp retort, nothing to indicate that he had been personally attacked just moments before. His response wasn't just a reaction. It was a reflection, an unexpected turn in the narrative that had been shaping itself in the room. The journalist stood frozen at the podium, caught off guard by Barron's unflappable demeanor. Barron continued, his eyes never leaving the journalist. "I've grown up watching people make assumptions about me, my family, and my life," he said, the words ringing with quiet authority. "It's almost become a game to some, a way to fill in the gaps when you don't know the full story. And I get it. We're public figures. It comes with the territory." The audience, which had been tense and expectant, seemed to shift. They leaned forward slightly, captivated by Barron's maturity, his ability to articulate what many of them had been thinking but had never dared to express. He wasn't here to throw back insults or attempt to outwit the journalist. No, Barron was giving them something far more powerful: perspective. "There's something important that often gets overlooked," Barron continued, his voice gaining a subtle intensity. "Behind every headline, behind every punchline, there's a human being, someone with their own struggles, their own dreams, and their own story. You may think you know me because of who my father is, but you don't. Not really." The room grew even quieter. Barron's words weren't an attack. They were a challenge. A challenge not only to the journalist but to everyone in the room, to the world outside, to all those who saw public figures as nothing more than caricatures or punching bags. Barron wasn't a punchline. He was a person, just like the rest of them. The journalist, who had been gripping the edge of the podium, now seemed visibly uncomfortable. Their confident posture, and they made people pause and reconsider. "What I've learned," Barron said, his tone shifting, a subtle weight to his words now, "is that respect doesn't have to be earned. It should be given freely, especially when you don't know someone's story." A ripple of murmurs ran through the crowd. The tension, which had been thick just moments before, now hung in the air as a sense of collective introspection. Barron's words had resonated far beyond the intended target. They spoke to something universal: the idea that respect, empathy, and understanding should be the default response, not the exception. Barron paused, taking a moment to collect his thoughts before he spoke again. "We live in a time where it's easy to tear each other down," he said, his voice steady but filled with quiet conviction. "Words have power. They can hurt or they can heal. They can divide or they can unite. And I think we could all use a little more of the latter." The audience, many of whom had been complicit in the earlier laughter, now sat motionless. Some shifted in their seats, others simply looked down, as if in silent agreement with what Barron was saying. It was a sobering realization for many. Words can wound, but they can also heal. And in that moment, Barron's words were nothing less than a balm. Barron's gaze now turned slightly, addressing not just the journalist, but the entire room. "I hope this gives you something to think about," he said softly. There was no malice in his voice, no anger, only a quiet strength that left the room in awe. He turned and began walking back to his seat. The soft clicks of his shoes against the polished floor echoed through the ballroom, the only sound in the stunned silence that followed. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the journalist stood frozen, their earlier bravado completely dissolved. Barron had taken control of the moment, not with anger, but with poise, dignity, and a quiet, unwavering strength. As Barron returned to his table, the applause began. It started as a hesitant clap, unsure and quiet, coming from somewhere near the front of the room. But within moments, The applause grew, spreading quickly through the crowd like wildfire. People stood to their feet, clapping not just out of admiration, but out of respect. The thunderous standing ovation filled the room, the energy shifting from tension to admiration. The journalist, still standing at the podium, attempted to muster a smile. But it was clear the moment no longer belonged to them. The evening's spotlight had been completely claimed by Barron. And as the applause continued, Barron remained composed. He offered only a polite nod to the attendees around him, his demeanor quiet and unassuming. It wasn't humility, nor was it shyness. It was the quiet assurance of someone who had said exactly what needed to be said. Within hours of the gala, snippets of Barron's speech began flooding social media. The powerful moments when he addressed the journalist with calm dignity, his words that cut through the tension in the room, quickly spread across Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Clips of the event, recorded by attendees who had discreetly captured the moment on their phones, were shared across countless platforms. The footage quickly became viral, and it wasn't just about the drama. It was about the powerful message Barron had delivered in that ballroom. One viral tweet read, "Barron Trump just schooled an entire room on class and respect." The simplicity of the message resonated with people who had witnessed the moment unfold. It wasn't a political statement. It was a call for humanity. Another post, shared by a prominent celebrity who had been in attendance, stated, "No matter what you think of his family, this young man just gave us all something to think about." News outlets quickly picked up the story. Many focused on the bravery and maturity Barron showed in addressing the crowd, while others scrutinized the ethics of the journalist's remarks. The next morning's headlines featured the unfolding story, with debates erupting about whether public figures, especially young ones, should ever be subject to such ridicule. Some outlets praised Barron for his calm and thoughtful response, calling it a defining moment for someone who had spent much of his life in the shadow of public scrutiny. Barron had become an unlikely figurehead of dignity in an era where public figures were often torn down for the sake of a headline or a laugh. Others, however, questioned whether it was appropriate for a journalist to mock someone so young, regardless of their family background. Even the journalist, who had felt so secure in their humor just hours earlier, issued a statement the following day. "Comedy and commentary are powerful tools," they said, "but they must be wielded responsibly. Last night I crossed a line, and I apologized to Barron Trump for my remarks." The apology, however, wasn't universally accepted. While some people believed the journalist's words were sincere, others were less forgiving. Talk shows, podcasts, and online forums buzzed with heated debates about the incident. Was it truly an apology, or was it simply damage control? Did the journalist's remarks cross a line, and if so, why was it so easy for public figures to make those types of jokes about a young man who hadn't asked to be in the spotlight? But while the journalists and critics debated, Barron seemed unaffected by the frenzy. To those who knew him, it was no surprise. Barron had always been an intensely private individual, someone who preferred to keep to himself rather than seek attention. The hoopla that followed the gala seemed almost irrelevant to him. He continued with his studies and personal interests, unaffected by the massive wave of attention that had followed his measured words. Yet, even if Barron didn't engage with the media circus surrounding him, the conversation sparked by his actions continued to ripple outward. In classrooms, dinner tables, and offices across the country, people began to talk about respect, about the power of words and the importance of treating others with dignity, no matter their background or circumstances. Barron had inadvertently turned a viral moment into a lesson on empathy, kindness, and the need for more thoughtful communication in a world that seemed increasingly polarized. Parents, teachers, and mentors alike seized the opportunity to make Barron's speech a teachable moment. Videos of his words, especially his assertion that respect doesn't have to be earned, it should be given freely, were used in classrooms to discuss how words can impact others. Teachers praised Barron for his ability to address a deeply uncomfortable situation with such grace, and students used his example to reflect on how they could communicate more thoughtfully in their own lives. At home, parents used Barron's speech to talk with their children about how to handle criticism, how to deal with online bullying, and how to respond to ridicule or mockery without resorting to negativity. The simple message of "words can wound, but they can also heal" became a common thread in discussions about how we interact with others, both online and in person. Barron's speech became a symbol of something bigger than the moment itself, a reminder that the power of language extends far beyond mere entertainment or political commentary. It had the ability to heal, to unite, and to challenge us to think more carefully about the impact of our words. It was a call to elevate the discourse, to find ways to disagree without dehumanizing the other side, to choose empathy even in the face of provocation. At the same time, the moment demonstrated the deep divides that still existed in society, especially when it came to public figures. While some rallied around Barron's calm and measured response, others were quick to criticize the journalist's actions, raising questions about how we view public figures and the way we treat them. What was acceptable in the realm of comedy or commentary, and what crossed the line? Yet, Barron's words were clear. The line was where respect began to fade. He showed that while we may all be guilty of making assumptions or indulging in jokes at the expense of others, there is power in choosing to stop before the damage is done. He urged the audience, and everyone watching, to reflect on how we treat each other and how often we choose to build rather than tear down. In many ways, the evening was a turning point, not just for Barron, but for the way people began to view public discourse in general. Barron had offered a path forward, a way to respond to conflict without escalating it. His message was simple, but profound. We can disagree without demeaning one another, and we can challenge ideas without attacking the person behind them. As the days went on, the conversation surrounding the gala continued to evolve. The media attention slowly died down, replaced by news stories and controversies. But the lessons Barron had imparted lingered. For many, it was a moment of reflection, a moment to reconsider how they communicate, how they treat others, and how they can be part of a world that values empathy and understanding over ridicule and division. Barron, meanwhile, remained unchanged. He continued to live his life with the same quiet dignity that had defined him before the gala, and that would continue to define him after. He had chosen to rise above, to meet disrespect with composure, and in doing so had inspired others to do the same. As the media frenzy around Barron's speech began to settle, the legacy of that moment continued to grow. It wasn't just about a young man standing up for himself in the face of ridicule. It was about a deeper, more universal message about the importance of dignity, respect, and the impact our words can have on others. What Barron had done in that ballroom was not just a personal triumph, but a collective one. People from all walks of life, across the political spectrum and social divides, found common ground in their admiration for his maturity. It was as though Barron's calm demeanor had transcended the world of politics, and people saw him for who he was, a young man who had learned, perhaps sooner than most, how to be secure in himself despite external pressures. Even those who initially saw the journalist's remarks as harmless began to reconsider the ethical implications. Was it ever truly acceptable to make such personal jabs at someone? especially a young person, in the name of comedy or political commentary? Barron's quiet response made it clear that regardless of the intention behind the words, there was always a person on the other end, and that person deserved respect, even if they were in the public eye. The journalist's apology also set off a wave of discussion about accountability in the media. For many, it wasn't just about the apology itself, but about the broader responsibility that public figures have when it comes to how they engage with and influence the public. Barron's actions called attention to the fact that words are not without consequence. Even as a public figure, the journalist's remarks were not beyond scrutiny. And the moment made it clear that civility, no matter the setting, should never be sacrificed for the sake of entertainment or controversy. Though Barron didn't seek out any praise or recognition, his words sparked a deeper reflection in many. The impact of that evening wasn't just contained within the walls of the Fairmont Grand Hotel. It rippled out, affecting how people thought about conflict, public figures, and the need to cultivate empathy in every conversation. It wasn't just about Barron standing up for himself. It was about the realization that we all have the ability to choose how we respond to situations. Barron's ability to pause, to think carefully, and to offer a thoughtful, measured response showed that we can all make that choice. In a world where impulsive reactions often fuel division and anger, Barron's deliberate restraint was a rare example of someone opting for strength through silence, not violence. As time went on, more stories emerged about how Barron's actions were being used to inspire others. Teachers, counselors, and leaders used his example to illustrate the importance of managing emotions, practicing empathy, and cultivating self-respect in difficult situations. Children learned from Barron's example not just in terms of how to respond to ridicule, but how to approach life's challenges with integrity. And adults, many of whom had witnessed the moment in real time, took to heart the power of choosing respect over condemnation. Barron's response was a reminder that we live in a time where kindness and respect often feel like rare commodities. The speed of modern life, especially in the digital age, can sometimes make it easy to forget that each tweet, each joke, each piece of commentary affects real people. What Barron had reminded us of, through his own unspoken words, was that in an increasingly polarized world, the ability to remain calm, compassionate, and respectful in the face of provocation is more important than ever. The attention surrounding Barron did not define him. It was the way he handled the attention that left the most lasting impression. Rather than allowing the moment to escalate into a viral spectacle of conflict, Barron chose to meet it with composure, allowing his actions to speak for themselves. This single act of quiet defiance reverberated through the collective consciousness, serving as a reminder that we all have the power to rise above and choose dignity. Eventually, news outlets moved on to new stories, and the whirlwind of attention surrounding the gala faded into the background. However, the lessons of that night continued to linger. Conversations about Barron's speech and the larger issues it touched on continued to spark debate in homes, schools, and communities. People began to ask themselves questions like, how often do we choose words that divide instead of unite? How often do we tear others down to feel better about ourselves or to advance our own opinions? How often do we fail to see the human being behind the headline or the public persona? Barron's simple, yet powerful response reminded us that no matter our position or perspective, we all deserve to be treated with respect and empathy. In many ways, his speech transcended the immediate situation, and instead left us with a universal truth. Words are powerful, and how we use them can shape the world around us. As for Barron, he remained grounded in the same quiet dignity he had exhibited that night. His decision to move past the spectacle and return to his life focused on his studies and personal interests, showed that the true power of his response was not in the attention it garnered, but in the impact it left on others. Barron had used his moment of public scrutiny to set an example of how to stand strong in the face of adversity, how to choose kindness, and how to remain true to oneself, no matter what the world says. And for the rest of us, Barron's example serves as a reminder. In a world full of noise, it's the quiet moments of dignity, of restraint, of choosing empathy over conflict that truly leave the most lasting impression. If you like this video, then subscribe this channel. Also, like this video,